here in Wisconsin, it took a lawsuit to get the state bar to remove a diversity, aka race-based internship program. It took a threat of a lawsuit from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Skylar Croy is standing by from Will to talk about this because that threat of a lawsuit ultimately producing a positive result appears to have, at least now it appears that they have backtracked on their intention not to offer the DEI-based internship program. So good to have you on the program. What's going on here?
Vicki, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So let me just back up a little bit and talk about what the State Bar's Diversity Clerkship Program was and maybe still is. So the clerkship program helps law students find summer employment in law firms and also government agencies. And there are a lot of big law firms and big government agencies that have participated over the past decade or so. And to be eligible for the program, and I just want to read the eligibility requirements because I think this is very important. This is directly from the State Bar's website. Quote, eligibility. First year Marquette University Law School and University of Wisconsin Law School students with backgrounds that have been historically excluded from the legal field who are in good standing may apply. End quote. So the language that we were concerned about at Will was this kind of vague, amorphous phrase with backgrounds that have been historically excluded from the legal field. I believe in past years, they've sometimes used the phrase with diverse backgrounds as well. Now, they also have a definition of diversity, and the definition of diversity that they had explicitly focused on race and other immutable characteristics. So we filed a lawsuit and we ultimately reached a settlement agreement with the bar. And in the bar settlement agreement, the bar agreed to do two things. First, it agreed to remove this language about with backgrounds that have been historically excluded from the legal field, from the eligibility criteria. So now the eligibility criteria just says that all first-year law students at Marquette and Wisconsin who are in good standing may apply. And then they also agreed to adopt a new definition of diversity that is focused not on race. In fact, it doesn't mention race at all, but it's focused on viewpoint and backgrounds and experiences. Now, where this gets interesting is that last week after this settlement was reached, the State Bar put out a press release and it put out another one yesterday. And it's claiming in that press release, or at least in the headline to the press release, that the program will continue, quote, unchanged. Now, that's a big problem because obviously there have been some changes that have been agreed to here. And if the program's going to continue unchanged, maybe there's going to have to be a second.
They know better. So they enter into an agreement saying, it's against the law for us to discriminate for this clerkship based on people's race or non-heterosexual white male background. So we're going to just stop doing that. We agree to that. And you say as well, thank you. That's exactly what we wanted. And then a day or two later, they say, no, that's not what we're doing. Not doing that at all. Nothing's changed. And so we're going to keep moving forward with our racist, anti-white male program for our clerkship, which is a great opportunity, by the way, to get a clerkship like that for a law student. So, I mean, you have to beat DEI into submission. You literally now at this point have to not only sue, but you have to monitor whether or not the conditions of a settlement are going to be met, because it's like they have their fingers crossed behind their backs. Skylar, I mean, even lawsuits aren't enough yet.
Well, Vicki, and this kind of goes to a little bit of what the problem is. So the State Bar's position is that the program was never illegal to begin with because when it used the phrase with backgrounds that have been historically excluded from the legal field, it never meant race. And in their in the settlement agreement, just to be clear about this, they have reserved the right to say that this settlement is really about saving costs of litigation. So they haven't actually conceded that the program was illegal. Now, that's actually very common for settlement agreements. Obviously, settlement agreements, people reach them all the time, and they say that the reason for it is because they want to save costs with litigation. But the important thing here is that they did agree to make changes, and those changes are all aimed at making sure that this program complies with the law. And then they put out a press release yesterday, and they say this new definition of diversity includes race. Now, I'm not entirely sure how they're reading the new definition of diversity to include race, but if that's how they're reading it, that kind of proves the point that the lawsuit was necessary to begin with, and that perhaps there's going to need to be follow-up litigation to make sure that that's their understanding as well.
But here's the thing, Schuyler, is that, happily, your client has Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty as representation, and you guys will do this. You'll okay, fine. You want lawsuit number 2? We'll give you lawsuit number 2. But most people don't have a pro bono law firm, public interest law firm representing them. And so if you get an agreement to stop violating the law, and I've talked about this on the program with Will attorneys before, the Supreme Court says you can't do this. Very recently reaffirmed you cannot do this. You cannot discriminate based on race, diversity, if it's a proxy for race, zip code, if it's a proxy for race, etc. Can't do it. It's illegal. It's been illegal for a long time. Okay, fine. There's the lawsuit. There's the settlement, or there's the decision from a court. And they say, we're going to do it anyway. That sounds like what the state bar is doing. We're going to do it anyway. Yeah, we got a settlement here, but we're going to do it anyway. School boards do the same thing. Yep, but the administration just does it anyway. How do you stop? How do you get compliance if the whole idea is basically to dare someone to force them to comply?
Well, and they are playing with fire here. So to back up a little bit, some of your listeners maybe know that under somewhat recent U.S. Supreme Court precedent, it is illegal to make anyone join a public sector union. That violates the freedom of association. So there have been attempts to get the U.S. Supreme Court to apply that precedent, which is called Janus. It's the Janus decision, to state bars. And so far, those attempts have been unsuccessful. My impression is that the U.S. Supreme Court is waiting for the right case. And if bars keep doing stuff like this, there is going to come a day where the U.S. Supreme Court is going to take a case. I don't know if I hope it will be a Will case. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, maybe it'll be somebody else's case. But there is going to come a day where they take a case and they look at, can you force lawyers to join the bar? And they aren't helping themselves right now by doing at a minimum, to be kind about this, doing very controversial things. And they're doing it with our money as attorneys, right? I have to pay hundreds of dollars a year to the state bar. My client, Daniel Sir, is a very accomplished attorney, also has to pay hundreds of dollars a year to the state bar. And then not only are we required to become members of this organization, but now our money is being used to fund these activities. So I think they're playing with fire, and one of these days there's a potential they're going to get burned. And if there's a decision that comes down from the U.S. Supreme Court that says, you know what, you don't have to join a bar to be a lawyer, which, by the way, is how it was for a long time in this country. The mandatory bars are a recent invention. That's going to be big for the bar, and that will hurt them, because that is going to be a problem for them financially.
Well, I like that line of logic. I hope that happens. I really do. I hope that professionals are no longer forced to join private professional organizations in order to hold licenses for professional jobs like lawyers or doctors, etc. But that could be a long time coming. In terms of just the demanding that this is the bar, for crying out loud, demanding that the bar actually follow the law. I don't think that's too big of an ask. But apparently, in 2024, when you've got a president who doesn't care what the Supreme Court said about bailing out student loans, forcing, illegal emission standards on manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. I guess the bar's feeling pretty comfortable saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, Skylar Croy and Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty? Make us? I hope the answer to that is adamantly yes. You are going to make them do this because the rest of us need these examples to sort of scare other organizations into obeying the law in the first place.
Well, and just to follow up on that a little bit, I forget how many years ago the video was, but a circuit court judge, so a state judge who was involved in helping out this clerkship program, I believe he was even on a committee for it at one point, is actually on video saying, this might actually be illegal. We got to be careful. There's some liability here. We may or may not get sued. And as far as I can tell, the bar really never made any changes in response to that concern. And there's at least an appearance here that the bar has kind of operated under the assumption that lawyers just aren't brave enough to sue it.
Yes.
And I will admit, taking on the bar is, I'll be frank. There are times where I'm nervous about this as an attorney. I'm sure there are times where a lot of people who have considered this were worried about it.
Skylar, unfortunately, I'm running out of time in this segment here, but I just want to close by saying if you can't trust the lawyers to follow the law, it's over. I do appreciate the time on the program. This is one to watch, folks. It's crazy. Thank you for joining me.